Wisteria, energy, twister.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this story is called The Beautiful Bigamist. Interesting title. The story of Catherine Canham is so romantic and tragic that it is no wonder that she is still remembered in the village where she once lived. But there are other reasons why. They still speak of her in the Bell Inn at Thorpe le Sucken. For although the beautiful Kitty was buried with great ceremony in the church vault in 1752, that was not the last the village was to hear of her. Catherine, known as Kitty, was born in 1720 to Robert and Judith Canham of Beaumont Hall, a much cherished daughter, as other children born into the family unfortunately died young. As she grew older, her beauty attracted admirers, including the Reverend Alexander Henry Gore, the vicar of Thorpe, who had soon lost his heart to pretty Kitty. And despite his brother's advice that she is a beautiful creature who will play you a trick, he asked for her hand in marriage and was accepted. The Reverend Gore must have sometimes ruefully remembered his brother's warning, as Kitty soon became bored with her life as the vicar's wife, and one day gossip spread like wildfire around the village. Mrs. Gove had vanished. Tongues wagged, and many were the theories about her sudden disappearance. One explanation put forward was that she'd gone to London to consult a doctor, and then had not returned. The other more exciting rumour had it that she had been seen leaving a masquerade, presumably in London, with a mysterious partner in arms. Naturally, the ludicrous one was the most popular version, and it may have been quite near the truth, as it transpired much later that, at some social occasion, Kitty had met a charming and well-connected young man, Lord Delmeny, who fell passionately in love with her and asked her to marry him. Faced with the choice of marriage to a wealthy young aristocrat, or a return to village life as vicar's wife, beautiful Kitty didn't hesitate. Lord Dalmeny knew nothing of her background and seemingly cared less. So, believing her to be a single girl, he and Kitty were married. During the next 4 years, they travelled on the continent, enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. But Kitty had never been strong, and in 1752 she became seriously ill. Sadly, it was soon clear that there was no hope of recovery, and, realising the moment of truth had arrived, Kitty asked for pen and paper and managed to write, "I am the wife of Reverend Alexander Gough, vicar of Thorpe le Sucken in Essex. My maiden name was Catherine Canham. My last request is to be buried at Thorpe." The effect of this bombshell on Lord Dalmeny is not so hard to imagine. It was a complete shock to him, but as he held his dying wife in his arms, his love was such that he forgave her. He forgave the deceit and promised to fulfil her last wishes. Kitty's body was embalmed and encased in an elaborate coffin decorated with large silver plates. The coffin was enclosed in a plain wooden chest. Her clothes and jewellery were packed up, and a grieving husband left Italy for France. There, adopting the pseudonym of Mr. Williams, he set sail for Dover, where he then boarded another ship bound for Harwich. But there was rough weather ahead, and the boat was driven into the mouth of the River Colne, where customs officers boarded it, and at the sight of the large wooden chest suspected contraband. One of the officers was about to plunge his cutlass into the box, but Mr. Williams drew his own sword to deter him and told them that the coffin contained the body of his wife. Still unconvinced, the customs men opened the coffin and found Kitty's body, but they were now inclined to suspect foul play. Dalmeny then admitted that he was not Mr. Williams of Hamburg, but a person of quality and was travelling back from Verona to bring his English wife home for burial. The customs men were still suspicious that a murder could have been committed, and they placed the coffin in the vestry of Heath Church until the body could be identified. Lord Dalmeny was kept prisoner there too, and he sat beside Kitty's coffin for several days until, among various people who came to look at this unhappy scene, a gentleman arrived who had known Kitty Canham and who recognised the body. Dalmeny explained to this gentleman that he was the Earl of Rosebery's son, born and educated in Italy, and that he was trying to fulfil his wife's dying wish to be returned to Thorpe for burial. The General Evening Post of the 15th of August, 1752 reported that the Reverend Gore was then summoned to identify Kitty, and although his first reaction on meeting the man his wife had bigamously married was to threaten to run Lord Dalmeny through with his sword, when they stood there in the presence of the dead woman that they had both loved, it was an emotional occasion. And when Dalmeny said that his affection for the lady was strong, that it was his earnest wish not only to attend her to the grave, but to be shut up forever with her there, and the two men were united in mutual sympathy and sorrow. At Kitty's funeral, the two husbands, in deep mourning, followed the magnificent hearse, hand in hand, to her burial in the church vault. Her heartbroken Dalmeny did not linger long after his beloved. He died 3 years later, aged only 31, but the Reverend Gore survived for another 22 years. The bell overlooks the graveyard at the back, and for many years it's been assumed that the female ghost who haunts the inn is Kitty. Over the mantelpiece in the bar is a 1960s portrait of a lady with dark hair and eyes and a wistful expression. She wears an off-the-shoulder dress with a rose at her bosom, and, as I suspected, the landlady told me with warm affection, "That's Kitty." There are many stories of Kitty's doings at the pub. Once a shadowy female figure was seen to glide through a closed door. For example, wardrobes had been moved and bedclothes disarranged. When I visited the Bell in 1994, the landlady told me that little things happen, nothing bad, then went on to relate that a few days earlier she had been tidying up a bedroom after some guests had left when she felt really strange. There was a pair of shoes on the floor, and as she moved to pick them up, the toe of one tipped right up off the floor as if it was dancing. "That's a room where things are supposed to happen," she said. It was quite scary for a moment. I was able to visit the Bell again recently. They now have 2 Rottweiler dogs, and I was told that they will never go into the room they call Kitty's room. The barmaid told me that only the previous week a wardrobe was found moved right away from the wall. No one could imagine how it happened. Also, she went on, yesterday there was a quiche on the kitchen table, and suddenly it shot right across the table and onto the floor as I watched, and there was no one else there. She laughed. "We always say that Kitty's about again, but there's always a friendly atmosphere, never anything nasty." I believe her. It's a pleasant, cosy pub with old carved beams, a splendid array of horse brasses, and a wooden board on the wall with a list of all the landlords at the Bell dating back to the first, William Sherlock, in 1607. Since I was there previously, they had hung a frame over the fireplace enclosing extract from a letter from Colchester dated August the 18th, 1752. An interesting contemporary account of Kitty's story. I was told that a Dutch lady had brought it not long ago, explaining that she found it in her attic. It may be around 250 years since this 18th century femme fatale came home to Thorpley Socken, but it will be a long time before they forget Kitty, their beautiful bigamist. The end. That's the end of that story. Now I understand why it's called The Beautiful Bigamist. Thank you for listening. Please leave a like, share if you can, and do consider subscribing. Many blessings.
Wisteria. Energy. Twister.